quiet evening, settle in, get comfortable, and take a slow, easy breath. Let your body sink into the mattress and let your shoulders drop. This is a long, gentle tale to accompany you into sleep. A calm, immersive retelling and expansion of a familiar story, smoothed into a steady, soothing narration. I will guide you through soft scenes of gardens and studios, quiet conversations and twilight streets, and a slow, reflective journey of emotions and images. Imagine a warm room with an open window, a breeze that carries the scent of roses, and light that falls like honey over everything. Imagine voices mingling gently in the background, friends sitting in a circle, a painting on an easel, the hush of night. As you listen, let each scene ease you further into rest. Breathe out, relax, and let the storytelling begin. There was a studio, filled with the warm, layered sense of summer. Roses heavy with perfume, the fresh, heady sweetness of lilac, the delicate, green perfume of pink thorn blossoms. When the afternoon breeze moved through the trees in the garden, just beyond the open door, the curtains stirred like something living, throwing faint, flickering shadows that drifted across the room, as if birds had passed overhead. Light lay soft and luminous on the floor. It filled the room with a golden hush that seemed to slow the very air. On a low divan draped with Persian saddlebags, a man of languid habits lay smoking many cigarettes, watching the garden with a calm, amused air. He had a way of moving that felt almost theatrical, an ease that suggested the world could be observed as though from a safe distance. And that observation itself was a kind of gentle pleasure. The breeze carried the faint, rhythmic sound of bees moving through the grass, and from a far corner, a muted hush, like the distant vibration of a great organ, came the hum of the city beyond, softened and round. In the center of the quiet room, supported on an easel, there stood a portrait. It was an entire figure, painted with a tenderness and skill that made the canvas glow. A young man of extraordinary beauty, composed there in luminous tones, seemed almost to breathe. The artist, a man of steady touch and deep feeling, sat near the portrait. He was the sort of painter who poured himself into his work, whose brush spoke in private ways of his own heart. For a long time, the painter simply looked. When someone loves a piece of work, there is a hush that settles around both artist and art. The world narrows, the edges soften, and silence feels like company. In the pause that followed, the painter's eyes closed as if to hold the picture within his mind a little longer, to keep what he loved safe. Another man, who liked paradox and said things with a kind of amused cruelty that always sounded like a dare, lay back in the divan and spoke in a low, languid voice. He admired the painting, but not the way painters usually admire. He picked at the world's conventions like a man playing at a game. He knew the rules too, bored and delighted at once. He suggested lightly that the work should go to an exhibition. He called it grandeur-sized places by names. half murmuring, half teasing, as though the right label might make the work mean more to people. The painter, quiet and somewhat reserved, said he would not exhibit the portrait, for it held too much of himself. He had given it more than color and form. He had given it something of his secret being. And there are some secrets, even in art, that the soul is reluctant to surrender. A friendship had formed between these three men: the artist, the dreamy interrogator, and the young man whose image lay on the canvas. And their conversation moved like a little river, reflective and winding, finding undercurrent and rhythm. When the young man first arrived at a social gathering weeks earlier, he had been a sudden, luminous presence. There are people who enter a room and alter its shape, as if the light itself shifted to make a place for them. To the painter, he was inspiration, the glance that changed the way light and line could be understood. The other friend called him names with a smile, an ironically flattering string of allusions. A charm, a narcissus, a living poem whose beauty itself seemed to frighten the plain things of strife and opinion. The artist walked in with a quiet gravity that made his friends smile. He had thought of the portrait as something too intimate to show the public. He told the other man this carefully: every portrait that is painted with feeling becomes a portrait of the painter as much as the sitter. In that quiet claim lay a deep tenderness and a private, vulnerable truth, and the simple confession made the room feel warm with shared secrecy. The young man, whose name the painter had given only gently to his confidant, was a thing of light and youth. He carried a certain ease, a musical quality, as if the world had been made for pleasure and gentle revelry. He wore his charm as the rest of them wore their clothes, with a kind of graceful certainty. He and the artist spent a great many hours together. The young man would sit for a pose, and the painter, whose life had been steadied by form and line, found in that face a new way of seeing. A brush stroke might begin as matter and become revelation. When the artist finished the canvas, he wrote his name across a corner in delicate, patient red, a marker of ownership, of a finished thought. One quiet afternoon, after the portrait had been completed, a conversation began in the garden that would turn like a slow wind in the lives of the three men. Under a drowse of sunlight, with trees murmuring and bees moving like small golden engines through the grass, the friend with the curious, dangerous voice began to speak about youth and the quickness of time. He said the most treasured thing in life is youth itself, its color and its readiness for delight. And he said it with a grave, almost pleading insistence, as if the words themselves were the only thing that might wake a man who had not yet noticed he was mortal. The young man listened. He stood as if caught by a new music. A single phrase to live now, not to delay, brushed against him and pressed. Words have that power sometimes. They find a place inside you, a small secret chamber, and a door you did not know existed opens to light. in the space between sentence and silence, he caught a new reflection of himself in the finished painting. Here, on canvas, was one frozen day of perfectly lit youth, and the thought that this luminous image could stay while he himself changed filled him with an overwhelming feeling. He imagined his face preserved in the painted glow, while he might grow old and harvest every kind of experience. If only, he murmured, a boy's wonder and a man's fierce desire meeting. If only the picture could keep what I am now, and the years be left to it. That impulse, a prayer in the shape of a child's wish, was natural in its simplicity, but wishes move in secret currents. For the artist and for their talkative friend, the words were dangerous. The artist, with the delicate tremor of a soul that takes every brushstroke as something intimate, was stunned. The other friend, trailing a little cynic smile, felt a certain thrill at the daring of imagining such a reversal of fate. For the young man, the imagination folded into longing. The sun set slow that evening, and as the shadows lengthened, the three men parted with their delicate tensions, left like hedgerows between them. After that first thundersoft evening, the young man found himself enchanted by a new life. He would go to the theater. In a crowded, flaring, slightly tawdry playhouse, he discovered an actress, a girl whose acting flamed in his mind like sudden bright fire. Her presence on the stage felt to him like truth. There are moments when art seems more alive than ordinary life. A voice, a glance, a gesture on a stage can sound as real as rain on a roof. He went often, night by night, mesmerized. At first, she seemed to him everything the world had meant to be. Brilliant, alive, a living poem. Their encounter behind the stage was shy and luminous. She seemed like a creature of twilight song. He felt both sudden and deep affection. He thought to rescue her from rough life with his wealth and his promise. A tender bargain formed in his heart, a private, ardent pledge made in quiet rooms, half hidden by wings and wings of velvet. They spoke of vows as if they would rise like doves and settle. He felt that because she made his life incandescent with feeling, she had made it holy. And then the night came when she faltered. Under the gaslight and the applause that had risen like a tide and ebbed hard and sudden, her acting failed in a way that was visible even to the ordinary crowd. Performance needs both courage and solitude. To be brave in public, you must have private hearts to hold you. She had never known that certain simple necessities of stage life could break her at once. When the young man saw her perform badly, where she had always been transcendent, something in his heart paused and congealed. He felt a small betrayal, a quiet fissure. He fled from the theater to the green room behind, where she knelt with the tender, childlike ferocity of someone who had been knocked down in the flood of life. She confessed, in her own way, that the truth of emotion had found her wandering. "I can act," she said, "but to be in love is to hold the thing that is real. The stage is a shadow." She meant with perfect, fragile honesty that the moment his love had made her life real. she could no longer simulate the illusion. That night, she turned from the world of make-believe to the real world of feeling. And in the shock, his heart, which had been so certain of adoration, closed and hardened. Later, when he again stood before the portrait alone now, with the quiet room washed by dawn, he saw something in the painted face that was new, an expression almost like an accusation. It struck him like a cold blade. He thought of his wish aloud in the studio, of the desire that the painting should hold his youth, while he might roam through years unmarked. He felt both ashamed and terrified. In the morning light, he saw the painting differently. What he had loved as a static perfection had become a mirror of what he feared. The desire to keep his own face forever young seemed to take on a meaning he had not anticipated. He saw it as a temptation and a trap both. There are moments when life will teach us in ways that are sheer as thunder. He felt suddenly small and old, and his chest ached with the sense of how quickly beauty could change when time touched it. Yet, in the strange place that divides moral compulsion from sick fascination, a subtle thought took shape. If there were some strange faculty by which what happened to the painted image could be born in place of himself, perhaps he could save himself while the canvas took the toll. He felt this as both fear and a secret relief. You can imagine how that feeling might fold the world into two: the part that cries for mercy and the part that is curious about the consequences. He spoke then to his two friends. One is a maker of art, and at heart, a man who feels everything too much. The other speaks in paradox, and gently seduces ideas out of people like a musician, teasing a tune out of an instrument. One would have counseled simply to take blame and to submit. The other would have admired the drama of the wish and dares one to live it. The young man lost balance between them. In the hush that followed, when the air seemed to stand still, as if the world held its breath, a choice was made. Time moved on, and the young man's life stretched into years. The portrait, which once had been a simple record of a day, became something else entirely, a ledger for the soul. In the hush of the locked room, he would sometimes stand before it and lay his hands alongside the painted hands and compare them like a man measuring a distance walked. That compare and contrast grew into a ritual. He would then go out into the world, where his beauty undimmed made him a subject of admiration and rumor. People loved him, envied him, suspected him. There was both devotion and gossip in the air around him, as it often is for anyone whose outward life seems to defy time. He gathered pleasures to himself in a way that was almost religious. Flowers and tapestries, rare music and warm, fragrant oils, objects whose texture and color could be arranged and admired as if they were verses in a poem. He collected sounds and perfumes, things that could change the light and the way the night smelled. With a careful, almost tender hand, he built a world that would please the senses and ease the mind. Yet all the while he kept returning to that room and the thing the canvas told him. The painted face changed, as if the hours themselves had stepped inside the painting and taken up lodging there. The playful lines of youth became small folds and then deeper marks, each like a tally on a mind's ledger. In the hush of those years, one of his friends was called to help him in a terrible way. A tragedy had come with the shape of April light. The artist who had painted the portrait, the one who had once loved beauty in a way that rendered him both devoted and vulnerable, vanished. Rumors like a web spread fast. Some said he had traveled abroad to rest his spirits. Some said he had been made a victim of the city's darker corners. The young man's world narrowed into suspicion and shame. A friend who was a scientist and a practical mind was summoned. The young man needed more than apologies. He needed the swift, cold work of decisions. In the slow, whispering rooms that the seasons had touched, the man's life became the stage of a quiet, bitter drama. He had to face something that would never be undone, that choices once made have consequences that are felt in the bones. There is a kind of private accounting that no public ledger knows. In the hush of midnight and the stark light of day, he realized, in the way that human beings realize the truth of their own smallness, that he had been moving along rails laid by a wish, and that the rails were leading him to a place he had not intended. What followed was a series of secret acts, decisions kept in a very small circle of trust. The young man reached out, sometimes out of the desperate demand of self-preservation, to a scientist friend. He sought help to remove traces of a consequence that might ruin him. He hoped to alter the record, to keep his facade safe, and to make the world continue untroubled by his private weather. Those decisions are always complicated. Men sometimes break their own oaths to save a life, or to hide a shame that would ruin many, or to keep a place of beauty in the world. He thought, for a time, that secrecy was a kind of mercy, a folded cloth over a wound that no one needs to see. And yet, the world is made of small details. Even the simplest object, a single knife, a lamp, a torn curtain, can hold a story like a seed holds a tree. In the end, the painting that had been meant to stand as an emblem for a private wish became a witness in a way no one had foreseen. Now, and this is a place in the story where your breathing may slow and your body can rest a little deeper. The young man found a night where everything had become too loud and too sharp. He came back to the room where the painting stood, where the quiet hush of morning used to be soft as breath. He felt the old desire rising like a tide again, to be free, to be safe in the unblemished face others would see. He thought to free himself by a final, irrevocable gesture. In that small, private room beneath the tilted roof, hands moved as if guided. He took a knife, and with a trembling and a kind of terrible resolve, he struck at the canvas. He thought the act would release him, that the painted record would be cut, would die, would deny its testimony as a ledger of his choices. He meant to silence the face that had become his private prosecutor. A strange hush followed, and later the servants who kept the house heard sounds they could not understand. They came, and in the stillness they found the young man collapsed. There was a silence thick as wool, and the story moved like smoke through corridors and streets. People spoke in the morning with curiosity and a tired, sorrowful fascination. What once had glowed like honey in the daylight was now the subject of shadowed talk. A single painting remained, golden in its frame. For the small truths of life sometimes show themselves only when the rest has gone away. In the hush that followed, people would try to explain the nature of beauty and the cost of wishing. Some said we should never fold the self into an image, calling it our refuge. Some warned that curiosity about secret powers is a dangerous thing. Others said that life itself is the art we each must live, not a piece of painted canvas to be changed for our convenience. Slowly, if you let the story rest and breathe now, it calms into a gentling end. The lesson in it is as simple as a quiet lamp in an empty room. We live among many images, and many of them are mirrors. It is wise to treat them gently, to let beauty be admired and not worshipped, to let art be an opening rather than a trap. If there is one kind of mercy in the story, it is the reminder that time moves with us even when it seems to stand still, and that our choices follow like a patient tide. Now let your breath become even slower. Imagine the studio once more, the soft curtains, the scent of roses swelling like soft music, the painting catching some last slant of evening. Imagine the three men sitting in a quiet circle, their talk that evening finally leading them into a gentle silence. Give yourself permission to leave the story here. The rooms will wait, as will the garden, for new mornings. You can let the images hold nothing but a balm now, a soft, golden light. As you rest, imagine leaves moving gently with a breath of wind, the hush of bees in the evening, a moonlike hush over the city. Let each piece of the day dissolve into comfortable quiet. If your mind lingers on the tale, let it do so in the softest way, as if watching a theater candle burn low until it goes out. And if a single worry unlatches the edges of sleep, breathe down through it and imagine the warm room, the scent of roses, and a painted face held in a frame with a compassionate, unhurried distance. You are safe. The day is over. The world turns on softly. Allow your shoulders to relax, the softening of your face to come, and your thoughts to slow like gentle weather. Tonight, let the image of a warm studio, of a painted canvas, and the hush of friendship settle in the small corner of your mind where you keep calm things. Let sleep come like a generous friend, and may morning find you refreshed, with the quiet courage to greet a new day. Good night,